Now it's time for us to talk about business. And in order to do so, we have Dr. Kwesi Amponsah-Teria. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good. I'm fine. Thank you so much. And this morning, we're going to be talking about labor unions at our workplaces. Are they still of relevance? We ask ourselves this question because obviously in light of strikes, in light of actions that are being taken against trade unions, all the rest of it, we are asking, are they prevalent? Are they still necessary? So, Doc, first things first. Let's establish something first. What is a labor union?
Well, when we talk about labor union, basically we're talking about a group of employees with perhaps similar tasks being performed, working in similar industry, coming together so as to pursue a common agenda, as in seeking social and their economic interests at the workplace. You would realize that, well, as an individual, you wouldn't have that weight to discuss issues of concern at the workplace. But once you come together as a collective body, then it adds some weight to it. So, well, invariably, as individuals come together, well, they have a stronger voice to push or drive home their demands within organizations. So basically, that is what happens within. And we have various types. We have the one that talks about, we have the crafts union, we have the industry union, and we have the general union. Okay. With the crafts union, we are talking about those that are engaged in a particular task. So for instance, well, you have the musicians, what have you, workers union, or what have you, because they are engaged in a particular, and we have the industrial nature. Right. Once they are engaged in a particular industry, then that also can constitute a union. Right. Then we have the general, like the transport workers union. Well, you could have transport owners being part, well, artisans being part, etc., etc. So we have these different shades of unions. But in all these things, they come together to push an agenda that is a common agenda. Right. That is ensuring that, well, their social and their economic welfare is indeed protected.
Okay. Is it mandatory for an employee to join a union, or it's simply by choice?
No, it is not mandatory. It is not mandatory. Well, employees can decide to. But, well, if you look at the benefits in becoming a part of a union in an organization, well, it far outweighs you having to stand alone. So invariably, you have most employees joining unions in organizations.
And are these unions living up to expectation?
Rightly so. But I think that the dynamics of unions have changed because of some changes in global economy. You know, hitherto, the manufacturing sector globally used to be very strong, and that is where they used to have their base. But invariably, the manufacturing sector is losing out. And now you have a lot of unemployment situations in the country. You also have a situation where now the nature of work is changing. You have temporary staff and so forth and so on. So, well, the dynamics have changed. Right. In Ghana, for instance, now we're moving towards a service economy with more of people, and the unions used to derive their base from the manufacturing sector, where a lot more employees were there. Hence, they were more powerful in that regard. But as the dynamics change now, you realize that now the unions are also adapting to the changing trends now. For instance, now what you see most unions doing is not just shouting. They work behind the scene because now unemployment is on the ascendancy. So you reckon that now most unions try to collaborate with employers just to ensure sustainability of the employment of their members. Right. So you reckon that, well, unions are now fighting for employees to acquire some needed skills, knowledge and ability, so that should they be unemployed in one organization, they can find themselves jobs elsewhere. So you realize that the dynamics are not the same as it used to be.
Okay. Now, I mean, we've looked at it from the angle of the individual joining a union, being in a common cause, and, you know, fighting against the corporations or whatever the case is. Let's look at it from the other point of view. Unions could be considered as a nuisance to people who own companies. For instance, if you are coming up with demands that are not feasible economically or physically, then in that point of view, I mean, is the union effective, or are they just troublemakers?
Exactly, because there's a general perception that the main purpose of unions is just to instigate strike actions anytime the employees feel aggrieved by work satisfaction?
I'm thinking that that's a wrong perception. And well, for one to say that unions are a nuisance, well, I disagree. I disagree to that. I think that, well, unions play an important role in organization. I can imagine that in an organization where you don't have unions, where individuals have grievances, they would have to come individually to come talk, and so you'd realize the disruption that would occur in such an organization. But once we have a mother union, well, there's one voice. We have a place where we can address our issues to, and they will speak on our behalf. So that it's very, very helpful. And as I was saying, you see, unions play diverse roles. They play a political role, they play a service role, they play an enhancing role, and other roles as well. For instance, they collaborate with employers. Through their regulatory rules, they are able to ensure that, well, their members conduct themselves well at the various workplaces. Okay. And it is not the case that they are always just being pushed around just to do the bidding of employees. No. Unions now are very relevant. When you go to the trade unions now, you have very seasoned intellectuals there who conduct research to inform policies in various organizations. You see, sometimes you see the CEOs and executives of management of organizations might not have it all. It is important that somebody sometimes tell them that, well, you're going wrong this way. If you do it this way, it is better. As they share knowledge with employees, let us see employees to be major stakeholders in every organization. And as employees play their role through their unions, well, the organization would also flourish. Remember that, well, employees only derive their employment when the organizations tend to be sustainable. Without the organization, they don't have any employment.
Exactly.
So unions are not there just to disrupt the operations of the organization. No, they are not.
What is the success rate of these unions? Are they able to achieve most of these grievances by the employees?
It is not just with grievances. I mean, if you want to look at some of the history of unions globally, you just look at ANC in South Africa. If you talk about the COSATU union within the South Africa, I mean, they gave rise to ANC, and they lent a lot of power to ANC. And for that matter, you realize that, well, it brought about some change in that particular country. So the unions, it's not just within the organization, they also play a social and a political role as well. Okay. If you look at Zimbabwe at the moment, well, look at ZICTU. Their main person, Morgan Changara, much as he's not succeeded, well, because of the role he's playing, he used to be the general secretary. Because of the role he's playing and his background, gradually we are seeing some transformation in that particular nation. So unions are very, very important, and we should not discount them in organizations.
Right. So especially so. How successful are they? Are they able to effect change?
Obviously, in many areas. For instance, when you go to some organization, the health, the safety, and the welfare of employees are trampled upon flagrantly. But through the support of unions, they ensure that, well, employees' welfare are sought. The unions also help in enforcing, because, well, we talk about the Inspectorate Division of the Labor, how do you call it, the Ministry of Employment. Well, invariably, they are ill-equipped and ill-resourced. But through the unions, they are able to enforce some of the labor laws that we have, some of the labor the policies that relate to employment that we have. The unions are, in a way, helping to make the workplace, a work environment, very serene, very safe, and very healthy as well. So they are playing an important role. And we are talking about even a living wage. It is the unions who normally go when it comes to collective bargaining. It is the unions who represent employees. They look at the economic condition and are able to make a case, not just going there to just talk, but they conduct researches and are able to push that case through. So many times, well, you realize that, well, much as the increases that we see in our wages or in our salaries tend to be very marginal, they go a long way simply because the unions come with what we call a collective power. And for that matter, they are able to influence political decisions when it comes to salary and even with the utilities that we have.
Don't get me started on utilities. All right, but let's talk about the union itself, the body of the union. I mean, if I get up one day and I say I want to start a union, what do I need? How many members do I need? Do I need to pay a membership? Do I need to be qualified in any way to start up a union?
Well, within the labor law, well, they give requirements for the establishment of a union. Well, so for individuals, well, where you have 2 or more people working in an organization, well, you should have a constitution. You should establish clearly what you stand for. Yeah, and having established that, you should also indicate the executives of the union. You should have a permanent address that one can write to. You should also have executives that report to the union. You should, within the constitution, clearly stipulate conditions for suspension of members, etc., etc. And once you have all these things in place, then you could go register it as a union with a membership. In organizations also, it is said that, well, when you want to go according to the industrial unionization, it is more with organizations that tend to have about 15 employees and more. They can decide to come together, and through the same whole process, they are also able to...
Where do you register a union?
Well, the Labor Department, and you realize that, well, the Industrial Relations Act sort of previously indicated that, well, unions are supposed to be under the trade union congress, like organizational unions, our employer unions are supposed to be under the trade union congress. But now, people working in the public sector are given that even bargaining chip where they can also go and register and do their own thing as well. So I think that has been open as well.
Is it true that some companies refuse their workers to form unions?
Well, it is very true.
What does the Labour Act say about that?
The Labour Act is against that because the Labour Act provides for freedom. I mean, when you look at Part 11 and Section 79 of the Labour Act, it gives rights for freedom of association within the organization. So, well, I think that what the Labour Act frowns on it.
So, why are these companies refusing their workers?
Well, obviously because, well, in their minds, it's because it's lack of understanding and lack of appreciation of the roles of the union. Because the thinking is that, well, unions are disruptive. That is what, and even through the interview,
the way the companies think.
Yeah, most of them, because once they come together, they have that collective power, and they are able to push a particular agenda. Hence, it frustrates the efforts of organization. So organizations, in order to gag their employees, would want to use that to gag their employees. You realize that, well, in most organizations where we tend to have this frequent occurrence of accidents, where we have the rights of employees being abused, invariably when they get in there, you realize that they don't have unions. This is just simply because they want to trample on the rights of employees. That is why they would gag employees and they will insist that you don't have unions. But where you have unions in that organization, because of that collective power that they have, obviously you need to do things right, and the unions will push you to do things right.
Okay, for instance, if a union has been set up within an organization and an employee refuses or decides not to be part of that union, if the union goes forward and, say for instance, requests for a policy change within the company, or let's just say a pay increment within the company, does the person outside the union benefit from the union?
Obviously. Still. The only problem is that, well, it is when it comes to individual representation. Right. Well, if sometimes, well, you are caught at the other side of the law, and for that matter, you need a representation from the union. Right. Well, then you don't get them. Right. And you realize that because of that collective power, as I keep repeating, that they have, if they represent your interests, it is more likely that the organization would give hearing to them than you as an individual.
So, but at that point in time, I realize I need to be in the union. Can I jump inside? And
well, you don't get to derive the benefits at that particular moment.
Yeah. Okay, all right then. Sandra? Yeah?
Covered almost about everything.
Okay, I mean, just to clear things up, I mean, obviously, there are a lot of unions out there. Government is actually encouraging people to, join certain unions. The taxi drivers were forced to join GPRTU. What are the pros and cons of being in a union? Just for the layman, I mean, if they're out there at this moment in time and they've been approached by a union rep within their organization saying, join us. Just give the basic pros and cons of being in the union.
Well, I feel that, well, when you join a union, one, because of that collective power, they are able to advance your interest better within organization.
Okay.
And two, unions also provide certain services to their members. For instance, when you need a legal representation at the courts, the unions are able to represent your interests at the courts.
Right.
Also, when you need legal advice, the unions are also able to advise you when perhaps you have a contract with an organization. You could go show your contract to the union for them to advise whether the content or the details of the contract is suitable. So the unions...
So all this is paid for by the union?
Obviously.
From the dues or
yes,
whatever
because of your subscription to the
right.
union.
Right.
So you derive all this from the union as well. And for instance, within the labor law, employees can withdraw themselves from work when they consider the environment in which they are working to be detrimental to their health and their safety.
I.e. strike action.
Well, it is not by you striking. You can decide that, well, the environment is not suitable for my health and my safety, so I would withdraw my services. And the organization cannot sack you.
Right.
Because you have the backing of the union. Because you have the backing of the union. But can you imagine that, well, you are an individual and you are saying that, well, I'm not going to do this because that definitely
will be sacked.
Definitely. Yeah. So I think that the benefits that one derives from the union far outweighs. When it comes to the cons, it is only the case that, well, you have to pay a subscription fee, so which will sometimes will reduce your income that you are earning. And secondly, also,
how expensive are these?
It is not expensive. It is not expensive. It is not expensive. And I can imagine that, well, sometimes also you would have the unions going to fight for something that is not in your interest. Left to you alone, you disagree with what the union is doing, but yet the masses support it. So obviously, well, you are caught in it. So these are some of the cons. But all in all, I think that, well, the unions have sought their interest, the social and economic interest of their members very well.
Power in numbers.
Obviously so. Obviously so.
All right. So thank you ever so much for coming in and helping us this morning. This has been Dr. Kwesi Amponsah Teria, who is a lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Thank you ever so much for coming in.